Pansay, good evening. I'm Chris Nachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced the second set of projects on Thursday afternoon that will be referred to the new Major Projects Office, where they are set to be fast-tracked through the regulatory process. 3 of the 6 projects have direct impacts on Indigenous communities. At a press conference in Terrace, BC, Carney announced 2 projects that will have direct impacts on Indigenous people in the region. Sea Lism's LNG is a proposed floating liquefied natural gas export facility located on a site owned by the Nisga'a Nation in northwest BC. Another project is the North Coast Transmission Line. It proposes to expand the electrical grid between Terrace and Prince George. The Prime Minister also referred the Iqaluit New Kiksotit hydro project to the Major Projects Office. The Inuit-owned project will help move Nunavut off diesel fuel to electrical power. Reporters asked Carney about Indigenous opposition to some of these projects, including the Sea Lism's LNG project.
Referring to the MPO, the Major Projects Office, does not mean the project is approved. It means that all the efforts are being put in place from the federal government in order to create the conditions so it could move forward. But those decisions are taken by many parties, including very much First Nations.
Now to Winnipeg, where news of a convicted killer being let out of prison has some of his victims' family members on edge. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew also weighed in, saying Shawn Lamb's statutory release from prison 12 years after his conviction is not justice. Shawn Lamb pleaded guilty to manslaughter in 2013 for killing 2 First Nation women in Winnipeg. They include 25-year-old Carolyn Sinclair and 18-year-old Lorna Blacksmith. Lamb was sentenced to 20 years minus 2 years for time already served. Second-degree murder charges were stayed due to not enough evidence in the death of 31-year-old Tanya Nipanak. Lamb served 2/3 of his sentence and is now under supervised release. Kinew says Lamb's release has inspired him to write a letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney. He says he wants the Prime Minister to confront the, quote, bigger picture questions regarding the way parole is administered and the broader systemic issues of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people. Have a listen.
How does this help the general public's sense of public safety? How does this help victims' family members heal and feel secure in the community? How does this help foster a feeling that our justice system actually delivers justice? I personally don't see this news as helping that process, and so I think there's a number of issues that I'll be raising with the Prime Minister, and yeah, it is about parole, it is about statutory release, it's about sentencing more generally, and just ensuring that if somebody takes multiple lives in our society, that they're going to be held accountable.
A few hours after the scrum with Premier Wab Kinew, a rally and round dance was held down the street from the Legislative Building, protesting the release of Shawn Lamb. First Nations leaders and family members of the victims shared their frustrations with the justice system. About 100 people came out in support, closing down Winnipeg's Main Street with healing drums and dancing. The families say they were not properly notified about Shawn Lamb's release and instead found out through the media and on social media. They say Lamb should not be out of prison. Paige Papanicus is Lorna Blacksmith's sister, the 18-year-old First Nations woman who died in 2012 at the hands of Lamb. Papanicus says the rally is advocating for all women, not just First Nations, to be safe following Lamb's release.
And here we are again today, gathered here because our women can't get justice. Today, a serial killer was released on the streets. Yes, he has a bit of conditions, but he's still free on the streets. We need to stop being walked on. This man getting out, that's a slap in the face and saying, hey, go do it again. That is not acceptable.
Now to BC, where APTN's Tina House brings us an in-depth report on the Cowichan land claim decision and what it means for both sides of the issue.
It all started in 2019 when the Cowichan tribes decided to go to court to fight for their traditional territory. And in August of 2025, a British Columbia Supreme Court judge ruled that the Cowichan tribes have Aboriginal title over this 5.7-kilometer piece of land. It's along the Fraser River in Richmond. The area was once the summer village of Indigenous, a place of great importance to the Cowichan people.
Well, I've been up here most of my life, since I was 14.
Robert Morales is a lawyer and chief negotiator for the Halkomelem Treaty Group. Although he wasn't a part of this court case, he has done extensive research and listened to oral history on the village of Indigenous.
The elders would go together, bulrushes, they would go together different species of fish, they would and dry them and bring them back for winter. They would go and gather mountain goat wool for making blankets and things like that. So as I say, there were resources there that weren't available here, and so it was a natural part of the rounds that they made in terms of their traditional territory and how they made use of it.
Now, the court's decision to grant Aboriginal title to the Cowichan is being appealed by the city of Richmond, the province, and the Musqueam Indian Band, who also claimed the area as their territory.
We respect the decision of Cowichan Nation to go to court to seek clarification. They were seeking a resolution with government for more than 30 years, and I understand why they decided to go to court. And at the same time, we have obligations both, I believe, to the Cowichan people about the injustice that was done to them, and also to private property owners in the province to provide clarity to them. We believe that the judge made some very serious errors in relation to the private property owners in Richmond, including the fact that they weren't even notified.
Landowners are scared, confused, and angry that the city of Richmond didn't tell them about this land claim. There are fears that the Cowichan tribe will kick them out of their homes now that they have title to the area. At this recent town hall meeting, homeowners had a chance to ask Mayor Malcolm Brodie some questions.
I'm asking you. You're the mayor. You're supposed to know everything that's going on in Richmond. I pay my taxes to you. Why did you not reach out to us? Why did you not send a letter? You send me a letter telling me there's going to be a hearing at City Hall, okay, with no real details. It's supposed to be information. Tonight, I've gotten zero information aside from what's on this little piece of paper, which is on the website already. So why didn't you reach out to us earlier?
Do the lawyers want to address that one? Yes. No, cool it, guys.
We also asked Mayor Brodie some questions after the town hall meeting. Your feet were held to the fire tonight, wondering about what you think about the homeowners asking why they weren't notified in 2014.
Yeah, well, you heard the answers. We've been working very hard on this case. We have gone through over 500 days of court hearings. We waited for the decision for 2 years before that. Application was made to have the plaintiffs give notice to the landowners. The court said it wasn't necessary, and so here we are.
The Cowichan tribes have been advised by legal counsel to not discuss the matter, but recently released this statement saying they were not going to be taking private homeowners' land. The Cowichan Nation's court case regarding their settlement lands at Indigenous and Richmond has not and does not challenge the effectiveness or validity of any title held by any individual private land owners. The ruling does not erase private property. However, Hereditary Chief Shanna Thomas from the Laxin First Nation spoke about the issue at a recent news conference in Vancouver.
This decision has really highlighted, I hope, for Canada and British Columbia, the need to invigorate the BC treaty process and the need to advance that process to conclude more agreements, because that is how we get certainty. That is how First Nations get constitutional protection.
Go back outside. There you go. Angela Smith owns this condo that she rents out within the affected zone of the land claim. She is very concerned and only found out about this decision 3 weeks ago. She also attended the town hall hoping for answers.
Did they offer any more information that we already had? Not really, just basically that it's all going to court and they're going to try to make it work out, but it could be a long time, 4 to 5 years to minimum.
And back in Duncan, BC on Vancouver Island, the home of the Cowichan Nation, Steve Sweetsil is a member. He says there are other nations also involved in this decision.
It's the Cowichan group, which is several different First Nations that are part of this Cowichan decision. Penalakat, Liaxin, Halalt, and Cowichan. So they're all part of this case. So for me, having some knowledge of the treaty process working back in the 90s for the Halkidiki Treaty Group, I was surprised and understood what was happening back then when this was being brought forward and virtually nothing was happening. So it's fascinating to watch how it's gotten to this point.
The decision is now being appealed, but tensions are still high for the homeowners, despite reassurance from the Cowichan tribes that they will not be taking over their homes. Tina House, APTN National News, Duncan.
Our Truth in Politics panel is up next with our Dennis Ward. We'll be right back. Welcome back. There is a lot of big news happening this week, from the statutory release of convicted killer Shawn Lamb to the early departure of Canada's prison watchdog Ivan Zinger. Those are our two topics on this week's Truth in Politics panel. Joining our Dennis Ward, as always, is Niigaan Sinclair, a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. And helping us out this week, Mi'kmaq lawyer and professor Pam Palmater.
Pam, thanks for helping us out. Niigaan, thanks for being in studio. We'll start with you, Niigaan, and with Shawn Lamb and his statutory release, which has no doubt caused a lot of outrage. Niigaan, your thoughts on this?
So the real problem with this case has always been the circumstances in which Lamb was found guilty for manslaughter. The sentencing for Lamb is pretty much on average, in fact, a little bit higher than average for manslaughter cases at 20 years. And serving 2/3 of that sentence means that he is up for parole. The real problem, of course, is that this was a situation of not just murder, but likely first-degree murder. And the fact that the case wasn't been able to take that to that full maximum sentence leads exactly to the things that many advocates here in Manitoba have been talking about for a long time, is that it's not just good enough to find people guilty. It's important to articulate that this was a systemic, a planned, and also something in which people, upon achieving violence or asserting violence on Indigenous women and girls, have almost little to no remorse about it, and they're not held to account. So in many cases, like for example, we are still searching for the remains, it is a endemic epidemic on society, and it is a condemnation on all of us that a person like this will now go free.
Pam, from what we understand, none of the families of the victims were informed ahead of time. Did the Parole Board of Canada handle this improperly?
I think so. And here's the thing. I know that our society is trying to balance all of these rights and laws and all of that when it comes to incarceration and convictions and things like that. However, knowing that he is a threat, a very serious life threat to Indigenous women, knowing that the families are probably worried about the safety, no notification is just one part of it. But the second part is, what is the system doing to protect the families from retaliation? What is the system doing to provide extra protections, knowing that they're releasing a significant risk to the community? And that's always my concern, far and above notifications, because what are they doing to protect Indigenous women and girls, knowing that there's a very serious risk here, and that there may be other things that come up in the future. And this little area here is always where the regret after the fact serious incidents happen. And then people are saying, oh, but why was he released? Or why was there no protections? Like, it's no good after the fact. They need to upfront be engaging here.
Niigaan, we're going to change subjects but stick with the prison system. And the federal correctional investigator, Ivan Zinger, held his last press conference this week and is leaving his post 2 years early. One of the reasons given was the government's failure to address the gross overrepresentation of Indigenous people in the federal prison system.
There is almost no will in the current situation in Ottawa to deal with the issue of incarceration with Indigenous peoples. I have a great deal of respect for Gary Ndesangari and the portfolio that he has, Minister Ndesangari, to deal with this issue, but the fact is that he's getting no traction within the current framework, which of course is focusing far more in economic reconciliation, or whatever else we want to call it this week, working with Indigenous communities, instead of working with the long history of systemic violence against Indigenous communities. And we see that consistently and continually, that social issues, especially in the federal budget, just are not getting traction, are not getting attention. And I spent some time last week in Ottawa with Senator Kim Pate and heard all of the ways in which the uphill battle that she is working to try to deal with the issue of the over-incarceration of Indigenous peoples in the federal correction system. And the fact is that it's just not being dealt with. And so I'm not surprised that we're at a breaking point where federal bureaucrats and people who are supposed to be dealing with this over the long period of time just simply are not getting any headway, are getting frustrated. And on the issue of mental health, a really basic human need is not being addressed. And so I'm not surprised you see resignation like this. In fact, I'm surprised you don't see more of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Pam, the report that Zinger did release this week was about the issues Indigenous inmates face when trying to obtain mental health services, and a lack of culturally based supports and poor continuity of mental health services upon release. Your thoughts on those findings?
Well, they're significant, but sadly, they're the exact same thing that the Office of the Correctional Investigator has been saying year after year after year. Because keep in mind, before Ivan Zinger, Howard Sapers was in that office for many, many, many years. Every single one of his reports said, Indigenous peoples, this over-incarceration, it's because of discriminatory federal policies. It's a refusal of the federal government to take action. They're not getting the supports. They're not having access. They're being discriminated at every part of the system. And that's assuming even that they are rightfully convicted, because keep in mind, Senator Kim Pate released a report about these 12 women that were wrongfully incarcerated, and she said there's many more. Mm-hmm. So, setting aside whether or not they should even be there, the fact that they're going to stay longer, they're not going to enjoy early releases on parole, they're not getting these supports, and mental health is absolutely key. No one should be in prison because they're suffering from mental health issues. That's not, even judges have said, well, sometimes that's the only place to get supports. And that system is broken. So good on him for trying to make a stand, but we could literally just keep submitting the exact same reports. Several problems, whether it's Liberals or Conservatives or NDP, there is simply no interest in addressing issues around incarceration. And one of the biggest challenges are the organizations that represent prison guards and corrections officials. They are the first ones to push back every time we try to advance legislative amendments to address any of this, like, for example, the ability to have people who are convicted in their communities instead of incarceration. It's something that the Supreme Court of Canada said decades ago, and said you need to look at alternatives to incarceration, but instead the incarceration rate just keeps exploding and getting worse.
Pam, Niigaan, we're going to leave it there and continue the conversation over on the podcast. Thanks to you both.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis, Niigaan, and Pam. We have more news after the break. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Time now for our photo of the day. As you probably may have seen, there was some northern lights in the sky the past 2 nights. Here is one shot from our viewer Toby Wilson from Norway House Cree Nation in Manitoba. She got quite the show as the northern lights danced their way across the sky. Hopefully you didn't whistle, Toby. Ee-hi. If you would like to be our next photo of the day, send them to share@aptn.ca. Maybe a photo of your first snowfall? That's just one suggestion. Time now for tomorrow's weather forecast. On the east coast, St. John's rain in 8, Charlottetown 5. Cartwright 4 and partly cloudy, Happy Valley Goose Bay 1. Saguenay -1, Quebec City sunny and 1. Ottawa sunny and 3, Toronto 5 and partly cloudy. Big Trout Lake 2, Sioux Lookout 6. -1 in Churchill, Thompson 1 and partly cloudy. Gimli 4, partly cloudy and Dauphin at 5. Regina 4, clear skies in Saskatoon at 4. Uranium City -4, Buffalo Narrows 2. Sun's out and high level at -5, Fort McMurray -2. Edmonton 4, Lethbridge 13. 10 and showers in Tofino, Vancouver, rain in 10. Fort Nelson sunny and -5, Prince George 0. Old Crow -24, Watson Lake -5. Norman Wells -15 and clear skies there, Wrigley -14. Sax Harbor -13, Colville Lake -24. -12 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield -8. And Arctic Bay -21, Aglulik -12. It's Thursday, and that means our Nation to Nation host Karen Pugliese joins us now from Ottawa to tell us what's coming up in tonight's episode right after the news.
Tonight on Nation to Nation, we're looking at the Prime Minister's big push on critical minerals and what it means for communities on the ground. Mark Carney says that mining is Canada's way out of U.S. trade dependence, but not everybody's on board. A chief in Ontario says he's being urged to greenlight mining projects that could threaten local water, and in the Yukon, a gold mine collapsed, spilling cyanide and shaking public trust. And an Inuit deputy minister warns Ottawa is moving ahead without fully consenting. That's all on Nation to Nation tonight. That's right after the news, so please stick around.
And make sure to keep it locked here for that new episode of Nation to Nation, less than a minute away. That's all the time we have for your evening newscast. We will see you again for our daytime newscast tomorrow with more stories. Please join us then. Miigwech, Kwana, hi hi. Thank you for watching and have a good evening. Ekse.